This week's Torah portion is Yitro, or Jethro, named after Moses' father-in-law. Today's commentary is primarily based on the following verses from this week's portion after God delivered the Ten Commandments to the Israelites. Exodus 20:18. Now all the people witnessed the thunderings, the lightning flashes, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood afar off. Then they said to Moses, "You speak with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die." And Moses said to the people, "Do not fear, for God has come to test you, and that his fear may be before you, so that you may not sin." So the people stood afar off, but Moses drew near the thick darkness where God was. Now I hear the word fear being brought up quite a lot, especially among Christian circles. I noticed a lot of songs on the Christian radio station about fear before the lockdowns. Fear you don't own me. Fear he is a liar. I did a quick search and found this article where someone listed over 20 Christian songs about fear. For all the issues many contemporary Christian artists may have, I can't help but wonder if God was using them to send a warning to his people. Because since lockdown started, we've been completely ruled by fear. People didn't want to leave their houses. Then they started wearing masks. Then they started getting injected with a brand new shot, all because they were afraid. My last commentary was a call to action. It was a call to rise up in faith and call on God to remove dictatorial leaders and restore our freedom. Now, I've heard people state that type of action to rally people to try and influence change is due to fear. It's because we're afraid of the current and foreseeable circumstances. Usually, when I hear Christians today talk about not fearing, they take it to mean we're supposed to do nothing and just accept the circumstances. But is that what we're supposed to do when we take on the call to fear not? The Hebrew root word for fear in Exodus 20:20 is yoreh. There are other Hebrew words translated to fear in the New King James, but I decided to look at the occurrences of this one in the Torah leading up to Exodus 20:20. I wanted to see if do not fear means to just sit back and change your state of mind, or if do not fear means we're supposed to take action. Due to time constraints with preparing and delivering this commentary, we're only going to look at a few of the first times yoreh came up. First, let's go to when Abraham kicked Hagar out of the camp. In Genesis 21:16, then Hagar went and sat down across from her son at a distance of about a bow shot. For she said to herself, "Let me not see the death of the boy." So she sat opposite him and lifted her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the lad. Then the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said to her, "What ails you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad and hold him with your hand, for I will make him a great nation." In this account, Hagar had given up and was just going to let her son die. She was in fear. That's why the angel of God told her to fear not. And what was she afraid of? Seeing the death of her son. She was afraid of death, just like the Israelites in Exodus 20 earlier. Moses had to tell the Israelites not to fear because they were afraid of dying. And what did the angel of God tell Hagar to do? He told Hagar to arise and lift her son. With instructing Hagar to go from a place of fear to a place of courage, he told her to go from a place of inaction to a place of action. Now let's go to the next chapter when Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac. Genesis 22:10. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." So he said, "Here I am." And he said, "Do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Here, Abraham demonstrated his fear by his actions as opposed to his inaction. But in this case, he was demonstrating that he feared God, which is a good type of fear. As Yeshua stated in Matthew 10:27, "Whatever I tell you in the dark, speak in the light, and what you hear in the ear, preach on the housetops. And do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul, but rather Fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a copper coin? And not one of them falls to the ground apart from your Father's will. But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Do not fear, therefore. You are of more value than many sparrows. Our actions, or lack thereof, show who we fear. The actions of many today, like wearing masks and getting vaccinated, show they're afraid of something that could potentially kill their body, but not their soul. Like the Israelites in Hagar, we read about earlier, they're afraid of death. Jesus told us to not fear death from this world. He told us to fear God who can cause our spiritual death. We are to fear God like Abraham did. Do our actions demonstrate we fear God, or do they show we fear death? Let's check out Isaac in Genesis 26, when there was a famine and quarreling over wells. Verse 24. And the Lord appeared to him the same night and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants for my servant Abraham's sake. So he built an altar there and called on the name of the Lord. And he pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servants dug a well. God told Isaac not to fear, and Isaac responded by taking action, by calling on the name of the Lord. I'll hear prayers these days like, things are going to keep getting worse. God, please help us be at peace when they do. I believe that's fearful prayer, afraid that God is unable to fix problems despite all the times he delivered his people throughout Scripture. When I gave my last commentary about taking action in prayer, Jason gave a status update on his mission. He gave testimonies of people in need who came for help. Did the mission ask God to give the needy peace while they starved? Did they ask God to give the sick rest until they died? Did they ask God to make babies comfortable in messy clothes? No. They prayed and asked God to provide for the needs. They asked for food. They asked for healing. They asked for diapers. And what happened? God provided for their needs. Why do we limit God? Why don't we think he wants to provide for even greater needs? Do we not believe that he is over the nations? It's because we're praying in fear and not in faith. I wish we all had faith like Jason does. It reminds me of David after Nathan confronted him about what he did with Bathsheba in 2 Samuel 12:14. But what you did caused the Lord's enemies to lose all respect for him. For this reason, the son who was born to you will die. Then Nathan went home, and the Lord caused the son of David and Bathsheba, Uriah's widow, to be very sick. David prayed to God for the baby. David fasted and went into his house and stayed there, lying on the ground all night. The elders of David's family came to him and tried to pull him up from the ground, but he refused to get up or to eat food with them. David didn't just sit back and let the baby die, even though that's what God ordained for him. David knew that God is capable of forgiveness and miracles. He knew God could heal any sickness. He demonstrated it by how he fervently prayed for the baby. Going back to my last commentary, if you're concerned about this country, this is how we need to pray for it. Even though we deserve God's judgment, we don't just sit back and do nothing. We need to seek God's forgiveness and his miraculous intervention. In this account, David didn't get the response he wanted. His baby died. How did David react? Verse 20, then David got up from the floor, washed himself, put lotions on, and changed his clothes. Then he went into the Lord's house to worship. After that, he went home and asked for something to eat. His servants gave him some food, and he ate. David's servants said to him, why are you doing this? When the baby was still alive, you fasted and you cried. Now that the baby is dead, you get up and eat food. David said, while the baby was still alive, I fasted and I cried. I thought, who knows? Maybe the Lord will feel sorry for me and let the baby live. But now that the baby is dead, why should I fast? I can't bring him back to life. Someday I will go to him, but he cannot come back to me. While there was still a chance to save the baby, David prayed as hard as he could. He didn't ask God to just make him unafraid of the situation. He asked God to change the situation. After it was too late, then David moved on. At that point, David lived in peace. That's how we have to pray for our situations. We can't be afraid to ask God to move mightily. We can't be afraid to expect that God can and wants to answer even the most drastic prayers. If we don't get the response we want, at that point, we can ask God to help us where we're at. But before that, we need to be waging spiritual warfare in faith, not fear. Shabbat Shalom.